policy making, well, a lawyer at the OLC drafts a memorandum advising agencies on any legal matter. I don't want to drill down just on torture right now, but when they offer advice, legal advice in the form of a memoranda, do they, in your experience, is there an ongoing role after the memoranda is written in helping to advise how to implement that advice that's offered?
Well, it will vary from topic to topic, but it would not be unusual for Office of Legal Counsel attorneys, after issuing a written opinion, to be asked follow-on questions or variations on the first question that had been asked,
right? Or
questions about what certain language in the opinion how that ought to be applied in light of circumstances that the agency or the Executive Office of the President is considering. So some back and forth is not at all unusual, I think.
And in your experience, would it be at all unusual if somebody who was actually trying to carry out and implement an activity that which they received guidance on from a legal memoranda would say, well, the memo doesn't speak specifically to this instance. Does it apply? Does it apply, or how would it apply in a given situation?
No, that wouldn't be unusual at all.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, one of the things I think we should know more about is, to what degree did people who are doing interrogation, in the light of the memo, the August 2002 memo, get direct advice on how to implement and how to interpret that memo? Now, I know you weren't part of that, but do you have any views on this subject? Is there anything you could tell us about it?
Well, typically those sorts of additional questions would come, I think, first, if you're talking about an administrative agency or branch of the services, would tend to go through their lawyer chain of command. It wouldn't be necessarily, and I think it would probably be unusual, for somebody in the field to call an Office of Legal Counsel lawyer directly. What they typically do, and because many of the requests that the Office of Legal Counsel receives for legal advice come in the first instance from a general counsel or a chief counsel. So the initial communication is lawyer to lawyer.
Right.
So there would be a communication if someone in the other department or branch was confused. The tendency would be for them to inquire of their general counsel's office, and then for a communication to come over to the Office of Legal Counsel from there. Right.
Now, Mr. Addington, you've been to Guantanamo Bay, obviously. Were you there during an interrogation of suspects?
As I mentioned this morning to Ms. Wasserman Schultz, I have a recollection, perhaps not on the September 2000 trip she was referring to, but perhaps, at least on one of the trips. I can recall us seeing people in a room, I guess you'd call it, and we could see through an observation window or up on a video screen, or maybe both. I do remember that.
Now, did the interrogators ever ask you any questions about how the interrogation could be legally conducted as it was going on?
I don't recall them doing that, no, sir, and I don't believe they did. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to be talking directly to an interrogator about what he'd be doing outside of his chain of command.
What about indirect?
Or her.
What about indirect? For example, if an interrogator went out, they might talk to someone in their agency. Did you have occasion for somebody in an agency to confer with them about how the interrogation might be continued on?
I spoke with the General Counsel's Office of the Central Intelligence Agency, as did a number of other folks. As I described, when the executive branch would have a meeting that they would invite me to, and we'd talk about it, both at the CIA and at DOD, although less so at DOD, Department of Defense.
So, speaking of regard to Mr. Haynes, is that
General
right?
Counsel.
And who's the individual you have in mind at the Central Intelligence Agency?
Well, early on, it was their general counsel, and he left and went back to New York to practice law.
What's his name?
Acting general counsel. The general counsel was a fellow named Scott Muller, M-U-L-L-E-R. And then he left, as I say, and was an acting general counsel, who I believe is still the acting general counsel.
Did you witness the interrogation process going forward while you were in Gitmo?
I don't know what else to say other than what I already said, that I remember seeing, through the observation window, an orange suit in there and someone talking.
Could you hear it? Did you hear it?
I don't recall you could hear it. You could just see it.
Were you part of a group of folks who made legal decisions on a regular and routine basis that would include Alberto Gonzalez, William Haynes, excuse me, sir. Oh, yeah. Jim Haynes, and yourself. Were you part of that?
I talk regularly, lots of different meetings with the Counsel of the President and his deputy, with the Department of Defense General Counsel, less frequently with the CIA General Counsel or Acting General Counsel, but yes.
Okay, so did you and Mr. Gonzalez and Haynes have sort of an ongoing responsibility or authority to guide the and make decisions about legal matters for the administration with regard to torture, detainees, the conduct of the war on terror?
No, I think it's more monitoring what's going on, discussing it, and if you need legal advice on the subject, you should ask a question to the legal counsel, which typically would be done either by the counsel to the president, if it's the White House that wants the advice, which the law, by the way, that you all passed provides for. It's 28 U.S.C., something like 511, 512 in that range. And also heads of agencies have the authority to go to OLC and get that legal advice, so that they usually do that through their general counsels, either DOD or...
Do you deny being a member of a war council that included Alberto Gonzalez, Mr. Haynes, and yourself?
No, it's interesting. I never heard that label until Jack Goldsmith wrote his book, The Terror Presidency, which has been quoted earlier in this hearing. We had meetings all the time. That's the same group of folks I was talking about earlier. I asked Jim about it once, and he said, oh, yeah, we call it the War Council over here. I'm not actually a fan of cute little names for meetings. It's a common executive branch habit, and I think that's where it came from.
So do you deny it, or do you admit it?
No, I think I just answered that question.
No, I don't think you did.
Okay. Well, as I said, I met regularly with Mr. Haynes, sometimes the CIA General Counsel, the Counsel of the President, Deputy Counsel of the President, and me on a range of issues, some of which dealt with interrogation of enemy combatants in the war on terror. At the Department of Defense, apparently when some of those meetings were held, they would list on their schedules War Council, as if that's some great name for this group. To me, it was just the lawyers getting together to talk.
That fast?